as luck would have it, during one of our walks down the street, we saw a for sale sign on a house. And it never occurred to me that I could afford a second house. But this is back in 2016. And we said, hey, we got some money for a down payment. Let's schedule an appointment. So we did. We looked at it. There was nothing wrong with the house, despite the fact that the price had been adjusted a couple times. We put in an offer that was lower than they were asking. We negotiated a little bit. And next thing you know, we own a second house. And we're like, all right, now what do we do?
Welcome to the Real Freedom Show, where we inspire you to pursue your passion to gain time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I'm your host, Mike Swenson. Let's get some real freedom together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Real Freedom, where we talk about different ways that we can build time and financial freedom through opportunities in real estate. I am your host, Mike Swenson, and today we're going to talk about moving from kind of the traditional W-2 type job to the opportunities that present itself within real estate, which is where I'm sure a lot of you people that are listening right now are at. People that want to get into real estate, don't know how to get started, want to get started with something and realizing it's taking longer than you think. And so today we're going to talk with Jason Muth, and he's going to share his journey about moving full-time into real estate. So a little bit quickly about his background. So he is the founder of 3 real estate companies and short-term rental businesses. We have Prideaway Stays, which is your kind of rental co-hosting business, shown on the shirt right there for those that are watching. Straightforward Short-Term Rentals, which is your owned and operated properties that you have. Also a podcast as well. And you do this all with your husband, Rory, who's a real estate attorney and broker, and 27-time Airbnb superhost status. So you are certainly doing a great job. So we're excited to hear more about kind of your life and what you're building and your process. So thank you for coming on and welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you, Mike. That is such an incredible introduction. You did so much homework on me, or at least you pretended like you did, and you did a great job with that. That's far more than I do with our podcast and our guests. So I appreciate that. There is one thing I have to correct, that I probably sent you the wrong materials, but we are now 29-time super hosts on Airbnb. So I think I might have sent you an old version of right. Some of our talking
bios
points,
get outdated and they get updated.
They do. Well, you know what? On Airbnb, they update that every quarter, right? So, you know, every quarter you're hoping to get that super host. And if you get it again, you could put a notch on your trophy case that you're another super host for another quarter. Oddly enough, this came up yesterday in a Facebook group where people were talking about things that, you know, either gripes with Airbnb, or it was a host community group, because I'm one of the host community leaders for New Hampshire and Airbnb. I'm going to be on a call like next week or something, and I think I was one of the first to respond. So I got to submit a question for Brian Chesky. Who knows if he'll actually answer the question, but it was along the line of like, hey, listen, how do you differentiate people that are 29-time superhosts from someone that's a superhost the first time and had 10 bookings? You know, and they don't really have that platform on Airbnb. So not to jump too much into the weeds, but, you know, we would love it as people that have been doing this for so long. I mean, I've been doing this for 8 years at this point. We've hosted thousands of people. I have, you know, almost 400 5-star reviews, but we're viewed as the same as someone that just came into this. And man, if you're listening to this, Brian, you got to fix that. Fix that for us.
Well, I was going to say, I'm 2-time superhost. We've got 4 properties, but at the same time, my superhost badge is the same as your superhost badge, but you have a ton more information and experience than I do.
It's so weird how it happened, though, because, you know, as you alluded to earlier, I've been working a W-2 job for most of my life. I mean, for over 25 years. And I was of the generation that you do well in high school to get to a great college. You do well in college, you form your way into a great career path. You know, I was supposed to be a doctor way back in the day. I took the MCAT and I realized I didn't want to do that. I was the science and math guy growing up. But man, when I got to college, I found radio. And back in the 90s, radio was a big deal. So I somehow ended up in the media business for the majority of my career. Radio, television, half that time was on the research side, half that time was as a sales manager or director, which is kind of really where the money is, unless you're talent and you're way up there. And, you know, this was not supposed to happen. Like, I wasn't supposed to be doing this. In fact, I was doing short-term rentals on the side during my final years working as a W-2 employee. And, you know, I stumbled into it, but because I had a little bit of extra money. I remember I had some Comcast stock, which I bought as an employee. I cashed it in to buy our first property that, we still hold to this day. And we didn't even know what we were doing. I was like, I've heard of this Airbnb thing. This was 2016. I think I could do this. We didn't have a rule book. We didn't know who to talk to about it. And then you just kind of stumble your way into success. Next thing you know, you've had a couple bookings, a couple guests, you learn some things along the way. There's a lot of big failures that happen as well. You become a super host that first time, that second time, like you are, that third time, whatever. And next thing you know, my God, 29 times, like I feel like a dinosaur in this business.
So kind of talk about maybe the why behind getting started. Some people it's like, hey, I read a book, something landed with me. I've got this story of, wanting to pave my own path, and so just curious for you, in addition to working your W-2 job, what was it about doing the stuff on the side, or what did you maybe think you wanted to have happen as a result of doing the side hustle or whatever, people might call that?
So I was in my early 40s and we found bigger pockets, like a lot of us do. And I credit them for putting me on the pathway that I'm on right now. We've been fortunate enough to have had a number of Bigger Pockets hosts on our podcast. I bumped into Dave Meyer, of all people, literally at a sandwich shop here in Newburyport, Massachusetts, when he was on his way to his wedding last year. And I, of course, went up to him and introduced myself. And then a few months later, I introduced myself again online and invited him onto our podcast, and he came. And there's such an influence over many of us, right? Everything they do, where they show real estate investing is available and accessible to anybody that wants to kind of like put their mind to it and put some skin into the game and take some risk and take a chance and go do this. Anybody can do this. So we used to listen to the Bigger Pockets podcast on long drives, like my husband and I, before we had our daughter. Maybe I'd be going down to New York to visit my family or be driving somewhere else. And, he's a real estate attorney and a real estate broker. So he knew a lot more about this than I did. But I knew that I liked what I was hearing. This was back in the Brandon Turner, Josh Dorkin days. And it was so accessible. It was everyday people that were telling these stories of purchasing real estate and it having a profound influence on their lives. I loved the job that I did. I loved the industry that I was in. I was doing really well at it, but I didn't see beyond that. At the time, I look back at this now, I'm like, my God, like I should have done this sooner. But, you got to start somewhere. So I was working like that good, worker bee working his way up in the corporate environments that I was in. And we were listening to this podcast. We started going to real estate meetups here in the Boston area. And we started meeting some other people that looked like us, that did jobs similar to what we did, and they were doing it. So we were like, we could do this stuff too. Like if these guys are doing it, why can't we do it? So fast forward to 2016, and there's a lake up in New Hampshire called Baxter Lake. We currently now own 3 properties at that lake. My husband's parents have retired to that lake. They had a camp that they turned into a vacation home for them. They were living in northern Massachusetts, and it was going to become their weekend getaway, and eventually it's become their retirement property. And they actually had a property next door to that they purchased, and they put on short-term rental before we even did any of this stuff. And they weren't doing it with all of the really well optimized systems that we're using, and that I'm guessing you're using. A lot of people that listen to this understand how to do it today. It was very DIY. They were on Airbnb. They were doing their own cleanings. So we were up at the lake visiting. We ended up staying there. It was probably a big family event or something, and they needed multiple places to put people. And, like my dog was there, and the floor was it was like this laminate floor where her fingernails would tap on the floor and wake us up super early in the morning. The windows faced east. There were no window coverings. It was the middle of the summer, so the sun was blazing in before 5 a.m. The bed was super uncomfortable. I felt a spring in my back. And I was like, Rory, I am not staying in this place ever again. And like, if your parents are going to keep this place and we're going to have to stay at this place, like whenever we visit, and if we have a family someday, this is where we're staying. I don't see that as super enjoyable, frankly. So as luck would have it, during one of our walks down the street, we saw a for sale sign on a house. And it never occurred to me that I could afford a second house. But this is back in 2016. And we said, hey, we got some money for a down payment. Let's schedule an appointment. So we did. We looked at it. There was nothing wrong with the house, despite the fact that the price had been adjusted a couple times. We put in an offer that was lower than they were asking. We negotiated a little bit, and next thing you know, we own a second house. And we're like, all right, now what do we do? And this is what we've done. So it's turned into, a portfolio of 5 investment properties that we own, one of which we built from the ground up. We have a short-term rental co-hosting company called Prideaway Stays that serves Provincetown, Massachusetts, where we have one of our properties. And we're about to launch a coaching company. And, it's how I spend all day, every day of my life these days.
It's so funny to hear your story of I'm naive, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I want to do something. And for people listening, like that is really how you get started. I think people, because there's so much content out there and people say, well, I can learn everything I need to learn for free by watching YouTube videos and whatever it is. They learn and they consume content and they learn, but they don't take action. And you're going to learn so much more by kind of blindly stumbling into something like that, buying it and figuring it out while doing it, than consuming a bunch of podcasts. So even though the podcasts are fantastic, you really are going to learn by doing and digging into it. And so kudos to you for deciding, hey, we're going to do this and we'll figure it out and we'll learn from there. And yeah, the technology and the tools have come a long way to help string everything together so you can maximize efficiency. But you had to go from nothing to something and kind of make that initial leap. And that's what I'd like to encourage people listening to do is you got to take that leap eventually, even if it is on the side, and then the side turns into full time.
So I was listening to one of your other podcasts. You had a gentleman on that went to Columbia who was a real estate investor, lives in New York City, I believe, had some property in Philly. He was a basketball player, if you remember. And he had a great analogy. He's like, listen, Michael Jordan by himself versus a team of 100 high schoolers is going to lose every day to those high schoolers because he's going at it alone. And I couldn't agree more. I didn't discover that until a number of years into doing short-term rentals because we were going at it alone. It was just us doing it. I can't even say me because, Rory is super helpful with everything that we do with the short-term rentals, whether it's acting as a broker or an attorney or acting as legitimately a handyman. He installs a lot of the tech. I know my limitations, like I'll paint stuff, I'll do a couple things, we'll hire the rest out, but he helps out at the properties. And that was it. It was just us. I was working full time somewhere else. And I started getting questions from people at work all about short-term rentals. And I was answering more of those than my actual job. That's when I knew that it was time to kind of like make the change because we were just killing it at work. I was hitting all of my goals. It's kind of a shrinking business, the media business, unfortunately. So, when I left, it was them telling me that my job was no more, despite the fact that 3 months later was about when I was going to voluntarily resign or try to get laid off. But that's when I discovered that I can't do it by myself. So you and I were talking off camera about the mastermind group that I'm in. It's called Short-Term Rental Secrets. And, since joining that 2 years ago, about a month or two after I came and did this full time, I realized there was a world of people out there that were just a support network that I could learn from, that I could have conversations with where we're talking the same language and the words, the terms that we're using, you don't have to kind of redefine from the ground up for somebody because they know exactly what you're talking about. I started going to all the short-term rental conferences. I started building good relationships with people that are in the space. I started finding people that wanted to talk to me about the work that we were doing. And I realized that, going at it by myself all those years brought me to where it brought me, it was good. But from that point onward, where I said, I'm going to invest in myself, I'm going to meet people that are doing this professionally full time. I'm going to partner with some of them on some opportunities in the future. And I'm going to present myself as this short-term rental expert that I know that I am. I just never was branded that way. It's given me all the confidence in the world that I can go talk to anybody in this space and they'll want to talk back because they're not going to look at me as a short, who's this guy? Well, you know who this guy is? This guy is doing this seriously right now. And this guy's doing this at a high level, talking to a lot of people that are also in this space. And I got to credit the mastermind for that, but you credit everything along the way. So Bigger Pockets is just such a big influence that got us interested in doing this. And then when we launched the Real Estate Law podcast back in 2019, and then really focused on it in 2021, that got lots of conversations like this going, where we were talking to people like yourself and other great professionals around the country that are real estate investors doing all these super interesting things. Next thing you know, you're building this network of folks that all have great stories, and they all have a very similar journey that they started not knowing what they were doing. And the next thing you know, they're running this big enterprise. And then I meet people in the short-term rental secrets mastermind, and I'm like, all right, these are my people. These are the folks that I could lean on if I have any questions, if I don't know how to get myself out of a certain situation, if I need some improvement with my mindset. A lot of what they do is just saying, listen, the sky's the limit. Like, don't limit yourself to what you think you could do today. Your mindset should be limitless, as is your business. And it's just such a different way for me to be thinking. I couldn't even imagine 3 years ago me being the person that I am today.
Talk a little bit about kind of that building and scaling piece. So you started with the one that you bought. You also now have a co-hosting business. So how did that develop for you as kind of, deciding, okay, we're going to own and we're also going to help others who own?
So in 2018, we purchased a second property in Provincetown, Massachusetts. It's on the very, very tip of Cape Cod. It's legit one of the gayest places in the country. It's very LGBTQ plus friendly, like unabashedly. I mean, our logo has a pride logo in it right there. They just had Carnival. We're recording this in the summertime, and there were probably 70,000 people there, all dressed up in costumes and having a great time. It's an amazing town that a lot of people in this community aspire to own property in. And we were fortunate enough to purchase before the massive spike that happened during COVID. We bought a condo in 2018. We didn't even know about our daughter at the time. We adopted her the following spring. So we were getting the place ready as our second investment. And then next thing you know, we find out that we're adopting a newborn baby the following May. So we kind of pivoted and made that into, as much of an income generating property as we can get out of it. We do use the property, like we go there on a fairly regular basis, but I always defer to the rental side of it. That came about because a friend of mine and his now husband owned property in Provincetown, and they said that it was doing pretty well. And I happen to have some extra money sitting in a savings account that I could put for a down payment. So we said maybe P-Town is the place to do it. And I remember we were about to go to a softball tournament. I was waiting for Rory to get ready. I saw a property pop back on the market. And this was after having searched one end of town to the other, didn't see anything we liked. And I said, this is it, put an offer in, and then let's go play the tournament. And then if we don't like the property, we'll back out of it somehow, because he's an attorney and knows how to do that kind of stuff, which is exactly what we did. And we put an offer in sight unseen, went down, checked out the property. It all checked out. And then we purchased that one in 2018. So now we're doing short-term rentals in two different markets, building up networks in both places, seeing the differences between two markets. And it's starting to really kick in. I'm like, I like this. Like, I like what I'm doing right here. So, investments happened in New Hampshire afterward, like where the property next door to us was a vacant lot that came for sale. We purchased that because we wanted to control the land that was next to us. The property next to that, a tree fell on top of it. We saw the owner's dad working on the roof. We said, what are you doing with the house? He's like, it's vacant. I said, would you consider an offer for this house? So we negotiated, we bought that house. And then along the way, I got a construction loan to clear that lot and build what is my favorite of the houses. It sleeps 14 people. We call it Camelot Chalet. It's beautiful. We built it from the ground up. And I qualified for that loan using my income. I still had a job when I did it. So I was able to get like a great 3% loan to build that property. We closed right before rates popped up. And then when the job ended, now I'm out there with commercial territory and commercial loans because I can't qualify a standard way. But we bought our fifth property after we sold our place in Boston and moved to Newburyport. And we didn't put all the money that we earned on that property down on this home. So we had some money left over. We put that down on that fifth property. And then the business came along after I joined Short-Term Rental Secrets Mastermind, where I realized lots of people in that group were running co-hosting businesses. And at the time, I just wanted to meet people and operate my 5 properties really well. But then once they got stabilized, I said, well, what am I going to do next? Like, what's the next challenge? And I looked to Provincetown. And I said, you know what everyone else is doing in this group, nobody is doing in P-Town. And I could do it really well because I could speak short-term rental. I have the credibility for that. And I could speak the gay language, which, I kind of joke about that, but it's legit a language that sometimes people who are in the LGBTQ plus community want to speak to people that are also part of that community. So I got a business partner for P-Town because I didn't want to do it by myself. My friend Ethan. I said, hey, what do you think of this idea? He thought about it. He said, it's a great idea. Let's do it. And here we are.
It's so fun to hear how things just grow organically, one step in front of the other. You're not going to necessarily know what 2 steps ahead looks like until you take the next step. But then you look back and you see, oh my gosh, I've accomplished a lot over this time just by kind of taking the next right step and the next right step. And, I'm guessing when you started your second location, you didn't probably go to AirDNA and run an analysis on projected revenue and all that and what amenities. And so I think, and sometimes nowadays when we do have the technology tools, we can kind of get in our own way, right? And maybe make decisions or not make decisions because we get scared to, because the data maybe doesn't support it. But you started it and you figured it out and you built and grew off of that versus having to wait for all the technology to tell you which was the perfect property to pick,
So, AirDNA, I got my subscription when I joined the mastermind. So, I've been able to see what happens across the country, whatever market I want to look at, for a couple of years now. And, we do use it for Provincetown. When people come to us for analysis, like I'll jump into AirDNA, I'll see what comps are in the area. I always see AirDNA as being a bit higher than what the reality is, because I always check my own properties, and what they think I'm making is not quite exactly what I'm making, but I think it's off by about 20%. So I don't know if it's the case across the country that way, but I know what I'm seeing. We did use AirDNA to help underwrite the property that we purchased in Guilford, New Hampshire, which is up in Lake Winnipesaukee. And as it turns out, the numbers were inflated, right? So like what the lender used for underwriting, I used a company called The Lender with a DSCR loan for that property. They underwrote me thinking there would be a certain revenue projection. I went into it thinking there'd be a certain revenue projection. And AirDNA said it was going to be a certain revenue projection. And sure enough, we're operating this property at a high level and we are not hitting that number, right? So it's okay. I mean, like right now, that is a long-term play. It's got some great tax benefits for us as well. It is bringing in money. We've had 40-something reviews, 5-star across the board. It's a really, really nice property. It's just not making what I thought it was going to. The other properties that I have are really helping supplement our entire portfolio. So I'm able to take a risk like that and maybe sit on it for a little bit longer if it doesn't pay off right this second. I think actually you guys were talking about it on that same episode that I cited, that people are looking too close to today to see if an investment makes sense. Whereas if you look a little further out, it will make sense 5-10 years from now. So anyway, so I use AirDNA for that, right? And I do think AirDNA is a good directional tool, meaning like, what's the direction the market's going in? What are some other properties, in this market looking like? And what does it think it's doing? It's not good I don't think it's good for absolute numbers, frankly. So I wouldn't underwrite another deal using AirDNA. I hope they're not listening to this, but I'm just not going to. But I do use AirDNA when I'm helping comp things out in Provincetown to give somebody an understanding as to what their property might be doing. I also use Price Labs, which is a dynamic pricing tool. And Price Labs, I think, is a bit stronger because it gives some real-time data as to what's happening with bookings. So it helps me determine occupancy, percentiles, where I should be pricing my properties, where I should be pricing our clients' properties, and kind of what I'm about to see in the coming months.
Yeah, and I think the key is the technology can help accent what we're doing, but at the same time, like, you're able to be successful prior to today's technology in running your businesses. And so I, once again, kind of get back to taking action probably trumps all the planning that you can do, because you're going to adjust, you're going to adapt to the actions that you've taken, versus I think a lot of times people that love to listen to podcasts just don't take action because they just like to consume content, right? And it's like, if you're consuming the content, consume it for the purpose of taking action to build and grow something substantial, because it's probably going to take longer than you think to be where you want to be. And so better to start now. One of the phrases on my old real estate team that I always used was, the best 2 times to plant a tree, 20 years ago and today, right? So if you couldn't plant it 20 years ago, we can't go back in time and change that, but we can do it today. So if you're looking to get started with a short-term rental, you absolutely can figure out a way to do that today. Have you ever heard the phrase, you're the average of the top 5 people that you hang around? Well, real estate agents, I'm excited to increase your 5 with you. We're launching the Real Freedom Investor Agent Tribe to help you get educated and connect with others to build your real estate investing journey, and also to help you along the way as you're working with real estate investors. So come check it out on our website, realfreedom.com. Go to the store. We have a membership, we have a mastermind group, and private coaching to help you stay accountable to your real estate investing goals, and to make sure that you connect with like-minded people to accelerate your progress and to cheer you on along the way. Check it out, realfreedom.com. Click on the store. Curious to hear your thoughts. Just because it's a lot of national news now about how short-term rentals have changed over the last few years. Obviously, COVID shaped it, but then people feel like it's on the way out. And then you see these national headlines about revenues down and things like that. I just love to hear, for somebody like you that has your finger on the pulse with so many different properties, where do you see short-term rentals heading in the next few years?
Well, we literally just ran our numbers today, because we're coming to the end of the month, so I track this stuff, and we're up year over year, across our whole portfolio. But I look at this like a sales team, where even though we're up overall, and the end is really the overall bucket of the assets, some of them are flat, some are up a lot, and a couple are down a little bit. And then that mutual fund of properties leads to an increase over my previous year. So really, what I look at is, I don't care how I got there, right? And that's what a sales manager would look at also. Frankly, if 9 of their salespeople missed budget by 10%, but one of them exceeded by 50, you're going to hit your number, you'll hit your quota. Not everyone will, but then you can work with the individual people to figure out how do you get from 90 to 100 or 105. So, I'm looking at each one of the properties, and we've identified one, and when I was talking about in Guilford, that we're watching, because if I don't see it making sense in a year from now or 2 years from now, maybe that's the one that we decide to 1031 into a different investment. I'm not fully connected to any of my properties that I wouldn't be willing to let any of them go. But if I would let any go, that would be the one that I would let go first, for a variety of reasons, even though we just had purchased that property. Where do I see things headed? I think it depends on the market. I here in New England, we've decided to focus on classic vacation markets that seem to be holding the test of time and popular across generations. Lots of folks want to buy investment properties or vacation properties within a drive of a major city, like where they live. We purposefully did not decide to invest in a market that was a 10-hour drive or a 4-hour flight, that we didn't really have too much kinship to, because we wanted to invest what we knew. And I do give this advice to people if they just don't know where to start. It's, well, what do you like? Where do you like to go? If you want to get into short-term rentals, maybe consider doing something in a market that you're familiar with, that you can get to, that just has a level of comfort for you. You could listen to all the podcasts, and next thing you know, you're investing in Scottsdale, Austin, Nashville, and the Smoky Mountains. But I mean, how many of those places? I've been to Scottsdale once, Nashville 3 times. I've never been to the Smoky Mountains. I've been to Austin a couple times, but I don't know those markets enough. And I don't think I have the skill or the interest to dig into markets that I just don't know. So I've decided to go to the markets that we do know, that are relatively near where we are, that over generations and generations, people have had experiences going to the lakes of New Hampshire, or experiences going to Cape Cod. And they seem to be continuing to get more popular as time goes on. I also look generationally, and I see a heck of a lot of people that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s that are living their best lives, living longer, wanting to buy real estate, and we're not building enough of it. So I see it as that finite resource and a huge cohort of people that are going to start competing over it, that I feel confident that prices will continue to be favorable to me as an owner. And the people that are wanting to go to these same places continue to outnumber those that don't. So, Boston is not exactly a market that I say Boston because I've been living in this market for a couple decades now. It's not like we have a huge influx of population here, but it's a pretty stable population throughout New England. That tells me that people are going to keep going to Cape Cod and keep going up to the lakes in New Hampshire. So I think we have pretty decent markets. That's why I think that it is very market dependent. Whereas you have some other markets that are like, in the Rocky Mountains, the Plains, the West, maybe it's harder to get to these places because you have to fly into them. It's not a quick drive from a major city. And they shot up in popularity during COVID. And I understand some of these markets are having challenges right now because things might have gotten a little overheated. So, I do think it's very market dependent. Every time I see a heat map on my Instagram feed from Bigger Pockets about prices, the Northeast is just solid. It just remains solid. So I focus in on what I'm interested in, where we've invested, and that is the Northeast.
It's fun. I like to keep track of the guests and kind of where they're coming from and what they're doing. But, it's so fun to see because it's the family reunions. Well, at least, here in Minneapolis,
Mhm.
St. Paul, it's the family reunions, it's the weddings, it's the sporting events, I used to live here and now I'm coming back here with a spouse or family members, or I used to live a ways away and now we're coming back and we're coming through here. Or I had somebody that was coming from out west and they spent 2 days here and then they're headed out east, and so people are still traveling. Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, people are going to go back to hotels. And I remember one guest that said, hey, I've got 4 kids. Hotels are hard, as somebody with 3 kids myself, that's hard to be able to make hotels work, and you can
Mhm.
get the 2 beds and the pull-out couch, but after a while, my kids now they fight over the pull-out couch because they get to sleep by themselves when they stay there, but they're not going to be as
Yeah.
excited about that. And obviously, I know with short-term rentals, you can have condos and other places. We have, single family homes, but this niche it serves a population of people that love to stay in a house. For you, like when they're traveling, right, there's limited places to stay, so they want to stay someplace that's nice. And so I still feel like that niche is going to be well served well into the future.
Yeah, New Hampshire, our customer profile is multi-generational families that are traveling. And, at Baxter Lake, it has had a culture of renting around. It's a small lake. It's not like it's a, huge destination like Sebago or Winnipesaukee. But we get people that are all types. Like we get people coming to weddings and funerals that are coming to celebrate an event, a big, 60 years for their 70th birthday party. Maybe it's a group of guys who wants to get together for a guys' weekend or a girls' weekend. We have neighbors whose relatives stay at our places because they don't have enough room at their own places. There's a couple farms nearby, and a couple people that live there have had a bunch of kids, so they have a lot of relatives that are coming in and they want to stay at a place like ours. One of the bookings that we just got yesterday, is people from New York City that are going up to Maine and making their way back to New York, and they're stopping at lots of places along the way. And they said that ours happened to be right in between two of their stops, and they thought it was a perfect location. So, like the New Hampshire properties have always just been that type of mixture of folks that are coming to the area. And we supply something that the hotels aren't able to supply. One of our properties sleeps 4 or 5 people, but the rest are 8, 10, 14. Okay. You have to rent a lot of hotel rooms to get your whole family at the
Mhm.
Holiday Inn or the Hampton Inn, and you're getting really generic, comfortable, but generic sleeping arrangements. You'll get a free breakfast, which we're not providing, but I got coffee. But you'll have your run of the house if you stay at our place, and you all get to stay together. I think that Airbnb and Vrbo have done some really fantastic marketing of late. Vrbo is marketing the fact that when you book a Vrbo, you're getting the entire house, right? And they're trying to go against Airbnb because Airbnb allows you still to rent a room within a house, which I've never done. I don't know if I'd ever stay that way, but that's how the company started. But I think Airbnb's marketing is like, when you rent an Airbnb, when you put the kids to bed, you're putting the kids to bed. You don't have to be on the desk right next to them or on the bed right next to them. Like you put them in
Mhm.
the bedroom, and then you and your spouse go and have a nice glass of wine, watching the sunset, watching the TV, hanging out with the rest of the family because you're not all staying in one room together. So I think that it's an important component of leisure, travel, hospitality that people like us supply. And Provincetown's a different market. Provincetown is not necessarily passersby. That is a destination market. So we know the
Mhm.
people that are going there, that is their end point. Whereas New Hampshire, we're getting people of all walks of life.
It's so funny you mentioned about the putting your kids to bed because I still remember, being in hotels and it's like we'd put our kid to bed and my wife and I would like each share an earbud sitting in a closet watching a movie on our computer, on the floor because our kid's sleeping in the room, right? And what else can you do? You don't want to wake them up. So yeah, there's a whole array of opportunity there that travelers and people looking for places to stay that they just can't
Mhm.
touch. It's so fun. I love it. My business partner kind of teases me when I share the backstory of like, oh, the person coming in today is coming from here and they're doing this and they're going there. Like it's so great to see the stories of the people as they travel and come in and out of the properties.
Yeah, I've noticed two things. We don't put guest books in our properties on purpose because I don't fully trust that what people are going to write is something that I want to have in the guest book for somebody to read through. I'm a
Hmm.
little paranoid about that, but reviews are reviews. That's fine. Like that's part of the process, but I just don't want to have that on site. The other thing I don't want to have on site is something that happened with some content creators that we had stay at one of our properties. To help with some lifestyle images, we traded a stay for their, for their photography and videos, which were mostly nice, but it was a touch weird seeing people in our space. And we use all these properties ourselves. So I get over it very easily that
Mhm.
hundreds of people, thousands of people have slept in, been in our properties, right? If they're not there when I'm not there, it doesn't matter. Like to me, like that's our space. Seeing somebody else like in our space and how they were interpreting it and doing it, I was like, I don't know if I like this, frankly. But the
Mhm.
final thing I'll say there is it is very touching to know that our properties have helped create memories for so many different guests, right? I don't need to see them. They're on the phones of all the guests that are there. We don't ask
Mhm.
people to hashtag us and show us all for the world to see. Those are private memories. They want to make those memories. They're private to them. I don't need to see it as the host.
Mhm.
But knowing that we've had years of guests stay at our properties with their families, doing whatever they were doing, enjoying their time there, you know, that that makes me really happy.
Awesome. What do you see for you and your husband and your family and kind of your companies as you continue to grow here over the next few years?
I need to learn a couple things. Like I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning how to leverage teams of people, raise money for bigger properties. I haven't
Mhm.
done that yet. I haven't tried to raise money for anything. I've been doing this financially, we've been doing it all on our own through, typical ways to fund properties, and it's been working fine. I bet you I could scale this a lot bigger if I wanted it to,
Mhm.
but I don't need to have all the money when I'm dead and buried. I need to have enough to keep myself happy and our family fed and us feel good about our lives. And I think that we're well on that pathway with what we have. I mean, a lot of people aspire to own 5 properties that can get their mortgages paid down by guests that are coming, and eventually you'll own them free and clear if that's what you choose, or you leverage them into other properties. Because over the years we've leveraged low interest home equity lines of credit back when they were low to kind of parlay up into other properties. We've bought and sold a couple things. We bought and sold a commercial property and did okay with that. So I think what we're going to do next, we are focusing on Prideaway Stays. We've started to really build the confidence that we're doing a good job with Prideaway Stays. The number of owners that we have right now, we've kept it very small just to build our systems up and make sure that we liked doing it and that we could do it
Mhm.
for other people. So I'm glad I didn't scale too quickly, that it got too overwhelming, because it is a lot of work. I mean, it's not just set it and forget it. You're getting questions left and right. And we do have a team of people also. We talked off camera about virtual assistants. So we have some VAs that are helping us, but a lot of the work we're doing ourselves. I'm doing myself, right? Just because we've built some systems, but sometimes things work outside of the systems. Um, but I've said this recently to some people, like if I wanted to scale Prideaway quicker, I probably could have, because I think the demand is there. We've sent out some marketing pieces, old school direct mail. We're really dialed in with a very good list to send to. We're just sending out our second mailer right now. We're starting with some email campaigns as well. It's been a lot of word of mouth, building relationships to lead to conversations that have eventually led to the clients that we have. But my guess is if we really put our pedal to the metal, for lack of a better phrase, I probably could have had 3x the clients at this point already. So we're
Mhm.
going to try to hit the goal that we have. Not try. We're going to hit the goal at the end of this year for how we set 2024 up. And then we're going to set new goal for clients next year and then continue growing that at the pace we want to. That's thing number one. Thing number two, we're going to keep optimizing the properties that we have. This was a big infrastructure year for the homes that we own. I ended up putting in 6 generators in our properties,
Mhm.
including our single family home, and I had to completely replace one of our air conditioning systems. That was another 18K I didn't expect to have to spend.
Mhm.
But a lot of money went right back into the properties this year, and we did that on purpose. We said, you know what, this might be a good year to kind of reinvest in the properties. I thought it was going to be simply just like upgrading my kitchen with butcher block counters and paint the cabinets, which is something that I did. But what I thought was going to be a $5,000 CapEx year turned into a $105,000 a year. But it is what it is, right? So now we have generators at all the properties. So that was this year. And then in the future, we're about to launch a coaching program with a couple of friends of mine that I met through the mastermind. More info on that to follow, but we realized that like not everybody that we talk to wants us to co-host the properties. They don't want to pay the co-hosting fees. They want to do it themselves, but they have no idea how to start because as you know, if you have a number of arbitrage properties, it takes a lot to get going, get those things furnished, get them supplied, get all of your automated messages going, start to build up a good reputation, photograph it well, and it took me years to learn this stuff, or at least find the community of people that could teach it to me well. And when I found that community, I was doing things about 85% correctly is how I've assessed it. But there were some things that I was like, oh my God, I have to fix this immediately. And the coaching program is going to help people, eliminate that ramp up, and they could, they should be able to like start right off the bat once they once they sign up with the program. But it's going to just be like, one-on-one coaching and consulting. It's not going to be like a big mastermind community, that kind of thing, which is more one-off stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for coming on and sharing. Cool to see kind of where you've been, how things got started, and where you're looking to go. For people that do want to reach out to you, that want to learn more about what you're doing or connect with you, how can they do so?
First of all, Mike, thank you for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate this. I think you guys have a great show, and I've watched a number of the episodes. I think you do a great job with, keeping the conversation going, especially for people like me that just keep talking. So you can reach out to me on my website, jasonmuth.com, which is MUTH. Or you can reach us at Prideaway Stays, so prideawaystays.com, PRIDE, awaystays.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, and best of luck to you in the future.